Hail fellow travelers, Tim from Secret Fire Books here. Time for another writing vlog where I give you an update on my current project, Death God of Mars. I'll put a little graphic that I made for it up there somewhere, as well as give you a look into the sort of writing process, creative process behind it. As of recording, it is May 15th. I finished the 5th chapter of the first draft 2 nights ago. I am actually a little bit behind schedule, honestly. I wanted to get 12 or 13 chapters of this book done by the end of the month, and I'm not even halfway near that. So hopefully things will speed up a little bit. I'm coming up to one of the big action set pieces in the story, and I really like writing action. I've been told that I'm actually pretty good at writing action. So hopefully that'll make things a little easier, and I'll hopefully quicken the pace a little bit, and that'll speed up the process a little bit more. Last night, the night of the 14th, I didn't really do any writing per se. I didn't really add anything to the current draft, but I did fix up my outline a little bit. I didn't change too much, but I fixed up the outline just a tiny bit, and I put together an index. I realized that I was getting all the names for the Martian characters and all the different concepts and factions and places and whatnot. I was getting those all confused, so I had to give myself an outline, or give myself an index. I wrote down all the names in alphabetical order, organize them all so that I can refer to those and won't get mixed up in the future. But the main thing that I wanted to talk about in this video is the inspiration for this project. Now, I started, like I said in my last video, I started writing this at the beginning of May, but this kind of goes back several years, in fact, all the way back to 2019, I think. And this goes back to something that I started doing with my niece, my sister's oldest daughter. When she was 2 years old, this kid was obsessed with monsters. She still is, but back then she was really obsessed with just the idea of monsters, werewolves and vampires and space aliens and mummies and Frankenstein's monster and all that kind of stuff. She just loved it, couldn't get enough of it. And so something that we really bonded over was sitting at the kitchen table and doodling in her coloring books. She would ask me to draw a monster for her, and I would, and she would get a real kick out of that. And so something that I would end up doing where I worked at this little bagel shop downtown in Baltimore, and whenever we had downtime, I would rip off a piece of receipt paper and just doodle a quick little sketch of a monster or something, and I would give it to her when I got home, and she would get a real kick out of that. And so then I would end up collecting several of those little doodles that I made into some sketchbooks, and there might actually be some of my niece's doodles in here as well. I don't know. I haven't really looked through them all that much lately. But what ended up happening is that I ended up taking some of those characters that I drew, and I thought I could make stories about these, and so I fleshed them out a little bit more. I did actual more fleshed out sketches of them in these notebooks, or sketchbooks rather. And I should point out, by the way, that I am not an artist by any stretch of the imagination. I've been drawing in sketchbooks like this ever since I was a little kid. I love doing that, but I'm not really an artist. I don't have any training. I'm not all that good. But I do have quite a few concepts here that I've drawn to sort of facilitate creative writing. And some of the characters that I came up with have found their way into my stories, and some I'm saving for future stories, but some of them will actually end up in the Death God of Mars. So that's what makes this relevant. So what I decided to do is I'm going to flip through these sketchbooks and give you guys a look at some of the characters and concepts that made their way into the story, and I'll put up some more detailed images on screen when I find some sketches that I really like. But you've been warned, I'm not too good of an artist, so these aren't beautiful by any means. Flipping open this first sketchbook, and the first thing we have is a pretty typical example of the thing that I would draw, me and my niece would draw together. I named this guy Sklorch. He's just a gooey mass of flesh. I don't know, my niece thought that was hilarious. She was grossed out, but she thought it was hilarious. So yeah, I drew him quite a few times. What else do we have? We have this guy, Jigsaw, which again is just another lump of flesh with a big eye stalk. I love drawing eye stalks for some reason. Got this floating eyeball monster called a Cleep. We might see more of those soon. This is the first version that I had of something called Exec, the God of Pain. I should say that quite a few of these concepts, I waffled back and forth as to what I wanted them to be in the story. If I wanted them to be just aliens or monsters, or whether I wanted them to be like demons or deities and stuff like that. And I kind of landed all over the board. Some of them, like I said, have made their way into stories as demons or deities, and others I have not used yet. Here's a more refined version of that character I just showed, Exec, the God of Pain. There is a different version that I like much better, but that's kind of what he morphed into, just this pillar of flesh with a big old eyeball at the top, a big unblinking eye at the top there. I don't remember what I was going to do with this guy, but I know I drew him a couple times. This is the Bulgorgian. Some big kissy lips and some bloody pinchers, some intestine-looking tentacles there. I don't know what I was going for there. Oh, yep, there's one of my niece's Doodles, little apple with arms and legs. Oh yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I doodled in here for my D&D campaigns. I got some maps of some D&D campaigns that I would run with my students at the church student ministry. The barbaric and underwhelming Conan gallery. I guess I doodled some Conan a little bit in 2019. Very rudimentary stuff, yes, but I had fun doing it. Yeah, I did some versions of Thulsa Doom, more Conan characters. We got Prospero right there, good old Prospero with his mustache. And then Thothamon, looking very snake-like, as he should. There's another Thulsa Doom up there. And then I finished it off with a very beefy-looking He-Man with some big old gorilla arms and like a crappy little Skeletor that I crossed out there. Here's some characters who kind of made their way into my Mayhem and Magic series. Some various kings of Dormir, the fictional country that those stories take place in. And there's some more Mayhem and Magic characters. Kalenbar, who is the sort of... he's also known as Callan, but at this point he was named Kalenbar, who is the kind of I guess he was like a messiah-like figure for the Twin Kingdoms of Yarakesh. And then at the bottom there's Silo, who I've written a few stories about. That was kind of how I envisioned him, more or less. Various runic scripts that I came up with. I think this is for some D&D stuff, but I can't remember. Yep, that's all for this first one. Let's move on to the second sketchbook. Right off the bat, no pun intended, in this one we get something that I called a Axorutian Yeekbat. I don't know what I was going for exactly, but I like that image, kind of. I like drawing things with one eye. I think it might have to do with the fact that I was obsessed with the concept of the Cyclops when I was a kid. So I think that's where that comes from. But Axorot, inspired by the traditional Prince of Hell in Catholic demonology, Astaroth. Axorot was something that I couldn't really decide on what I wanted it to be, whether it was a planet, a race of aliens, or a demon or a deity, but it was inspired by Astaroth originally. Here is my water deity, Yatmog, sort of this Cthulhu-esque water entity, Yatmog. He's got a big head shaped like an anchor with some chains, a bunch of tentacles. It's stupid, but I thought it was a creative little idea. Here's the first main concept for Axorot as an actual entity. And as you can see, sort of just a floating head with a detached jaw. I remember I drew him quite a few times for my niece, and again, she was grossed out, but she thought it was funny that he looked like that. And I have a more refined version of him in this sketchbook, I believe, that I'll show you in a minute. Here is a Nesh spider. Nesh is a concept that I recently included in my most recent issue of the Necromancer zine. I had a short story called In the House of Nesh, where this, not this specifically, but the concept of Nesh is featured. Nesh is sort of the embodiment of fear in my my cosmology, I guess. There's another version of Scorch right there. Now he has 3 eyes this time around. But yeah, Nesh, as pictured here, is sort of this embodiment of unknowable fear. And as you can see here, it's just this cloaked figure with a mask with this kind of eternally dripping eye at the center of its forehead. And in the story, in the House of Nesh, I changed that more to be just a face with these two eyeless sockets that are just eternally dripping this kind of black ichor. Very Lovecraftian, but I thought it was cool. Here's the first sketch I did of Vasago the Vile, who I've written a few stories about as well. Again, I'm not a great character artist, but that was what I was working with originally when I came up with that character. I have the first phase of something that I called the Geogorgon. It would eventually become an entirely different character. I think I have that character later in this book as well. I think I was trying to draw a Stormbringer from the Elric saga there. A Nesh Serpent. So yeah, there's the kind of eternally dripping blank eye sockets there. Yeah, I think that's when I started to really refine that concept. I don't know what this guy is. Some kind of alien, I guess. I don't know. I just doodled him randomly one day. I don't know what idea I was going for, but I like that guy. He's goofy looking. Okay, here's the more refined version of Axarat. Like I said, inspired by Astaroth. And he is kind of, in my cosmology that I've made, where most of my short stories take place in, he's kind of like the demon god, the demon personification, the demonic personification of lies and bureaucracy. Because screw government organizations. Okay, Tim, don't get political. But yeah, as you can see, I turned his kind of detached jaw into kind of like a steel mouth that kind of like opens like a steel trap almost. I don't know if that's the version that will eventually make it into a future story, but I like that. And again, I love the whole cycloptic eye thing. Yep, there's another version of the Bulgorgian where he just has one big, long, kind of blood-soaked tentacle there. I still don't know what I was going for with him. There's another alien, I think, a Kalmakian. Got like an odd number of fingers there on each hand. There's another version of the thing that I called the Geogorgon. He's got like these big sickles for hands now. And my idea was that his head is constantly breaking apart and reforming into different geometric shapes. So he has a cube right here, and then a pyramid, and like a diamond shape up there. I don't know. Like I said, he will eventually, as you will see, he will eventually become an entirely different character. And here's the version that I like the most of Igzek. So yes, Igzek is kind of the god of pain. Oh, and as you can see, he has those little eyeball monsters, the cleeps flying around him. Igzek is the demonic personification of pain and suffering. And so he's just this big pillar of flesh with no limbs. He actually hacked off his limbs many eons ago. And so he's just this big pillar of flesh with a lidless eye forever staring into the abyss. So yeah, I eventually I was going to put him into that scrapped Vasago the Vile novel. Who knows? That story might become something someday, so Igzek might end up being in a story in the future, but for now, he's just going to live on in my sketchbook. Okay, I think this is the final version of the Geogorgon that I created. Now, I eventually decided to name this guy Frailgore. Frailgore is the demonic personification of sloth and gluttony. He's kind of those two deadly sins combined. He is infirmed. He has this horrible wound, as you can see there, that one of his demonic brethren inflicted upon him, and it crippled him. And so he can't move. He's just this big mass that slithers around in the underworld. And I kind of designated him as the being that eats the souls of the damned as they enter the underworld. So that's what that mouth is, these grasping tentacles that lash out and grab the dead souls as they enter the underworld. Okay, here she is. I showed this off in the last vlog, but this is Tyralit. This is the figure that our main character Orin meets in Death God of Mars. She is the personification of law and order. I think the original concept that I was going for was sort of this alien race that's obsessed with symmetry. So as you can see, she's pretty symmetrical on both sides, as symmetrical as I can make her. And while I was sketching this character originally, I was about to give her eyes, and then I looked at that weirdly shaped head. It was like, that kind of looks cooler without eyes. And I vaguely remembered, I think it's the Angel of Death from the second Hellboy movie, how that thing had like this bony, bristly head that didn't have any eyes. And I was kind of trying to recapture that. And that eventually morphed into the idea of, blind justice, how the Roman personification of justice, Justitia, is often depicted with a blindfold. I think her Greek counterpart is Themis. Yeah, I think that's her. But yeah, so that concept got going. And so yeah, I decided to make her sort of this vaguely angelic figure, hence the weird wispy wings. And yes, in the story, I don't describe her as looking this creepy or alien. She looks a lot more angelic, a little bit more humanoid. But that was what I was originally going for. Well, I drew this for my niece. Just a happy little tree handing an apple to someone. I guess this is the good version of those apple trees from The Wizard of Oz. Bunch of swords. I love drawing swords. Oh, here we go. We also have, this is the original version of Sulphur Gore, who is a figure that appeared in my game book, The Castle of the Crystal Blade. One of the enemy factions that the player can encounter in that game book is a cult of Sulphur Gore. He is sort of this eldritch fire god, I guess. I sort of created him as a personification of destruction and corruption, and so yeah, he commands fire in that way. And I wanted to go for like a more Luciferian, classical El Diablo kind of demon. And obviously that's not the whole character. That's just a headshot. I used sort of AI constructed portrait for my original channel logo. So if you've ever wondered what that old channel logo was, that big fiery looking monster, that's him. That's Sulphur Gore. And so, like I said, he shows up in Castle of the Crystal Blade, or his cultists do at least. And I was going to include him in another sword and sorcery project I was working on. One that I don't know will ever see the light of day, but I'm hoping it will at some point. And he'll kind of feature as the main villain in that series, hopefully. Here's a rough outline I did of another version of that water god Iat-Mog, where he has some arms, some tentacle-looking arms. I don't know how easy that is to see. And then we just got a doodle I made of a knight fighting a genie or an Ifrit of some kind, maybe. Yep, another version of Stormbringer. You can tell that I was obsessed with the Elric saga at this point. Yeah, that's the contents of that sketchbook. So yeah, hopefully that gave you a little look into the concepts I was working with back in 2019, 2020, when the first seeds of this story were planted in my brain. And really, they're the first seeds of, like I said, this cosmology that I've made that kind of links all my different stories together. So when this novel, Death God of Mars, finally comes out, there might be some connections to some other stories that I've written. There might even be some connections to the Mayhem and Magic stuff, but we'll see. But in the meantime, thank you for watching, guys. Thanks for joining me on this little flip through of my different sketchbooks. Hopefully it wasn't too boring. Hopefully you got something out of it. But until next time, as always, farewell and keep reading.